Assalamu alaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh, everybody. Welcome back to the SOS, the Shout Out Show with me, your host, Preacher Moss. I'm so glad to have you on the show. For those who made it through the weekend, God bless you. I hope you had a good time. I hope it was fulfilling, all those good things. And for the people that are tuning into the show for the first time, we hope it's not your last time. And the people that are returning back, it's good to see you, family. Listen, we had a great show yesterday. I put it out on Sunday. And I got some really good reactions, and it's carried over. So I decided to do what we normally don't do on the show, except for one other time. We decided to have a part two. And the part two is a discussion that I wrote that began yesterday. Let's rewrite the damn Constitution. And somebody said, why do you say damn? I said, because it's not like damn because I'm mad. I mean, it's damned, if you will. It should be DAMNED. It's been a damn rip for a long time. And I want to explore that aspect because yesterday we ran out of time. And as one brother said, we need to revisit that because sometimes I don't get to do that on the show. We have a lot of topics. But today, I thought it was important to start talking about what constitutional law means for the people that don't frame constitutional law. Two items I want everybody to look up. I want you to look up the idea of critical race theory. Critical race theory is it's a legal term, but in the summation, it asks a basic question, a critical question. If there's a law on the books that affects people disproportionately, is it a valid law? Now, normally people will say, no, it's not. And that's the right answer. But we're not talking about moral law. We're talking about constitutional law, and we're talking about social law. Let me give a shout out to my sister. Sister Samaya, so glad to see you. Walaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. I hope you and your family are doing well. Thank you so much for tuning in. For those that don't know, Samaya is a world-class singer. When I say world-class, I don't mean like good. I mean like phenomenal singer. She's been doing everything from singing opera to Broadway. So anything you could check her out in, don't do it once, do it twice. So that's my advertisement for Sister Samaya. The other thing is, I think people think when we're talking about constitutional law, they overlook the fact that the constitutional law frames exactly how we live here in the United States. It frames where you can live. It frames your social mobility. It frames everything from how much money you can make, how you make it, taxes, all of that. And the thing is, we talk about framing. It was framed back in the 1700s, but it was not framed by people that look like you and I. Thus, it has a fundamental flaw. The fundamental flaw is, as we look for justice, you have to understand that justice now and justice in the past is based on people who don't look like you. People don't necessarily have the same core values as you. Thus, as we go through this whole thing of protest and outrage and all of that, we're making some critical mistakes because we're not looking at the scope of constitutional law and how it affects us. Now, when I say how it affects us, I don't mean just how you vote. It affects you that way because you're also having constitutional conversations about the upcoming elections. We lost an election with George Bush. How? It was a constitutional decision. Now, that aside, I think we need to look at how it permeates aspects of life. When I say permeate aspects of life, I mean your everyday living. And I'm going to put constitutional law in the same basket or the same fryer, if you will, with white supremacy. Because whether you want to admit it or not, they do go hand in hand. We have not found an effective way to extract one from the other. And we haven't found a way to break up the relationship between the two. Because, for lack of a better word, the constitutional law that's on the books right now allows for white supremacy. And I don't mean white supremacy over just black people and Latinos and Native Americans, women. I'm talking about white supremacy over white people. Because there are levels of whiteness here in the United States. You have to travel out. Sometimes you got to get out of your town. And I had a situation years ago. I was performing at a school called Augusta College. It was in Moline, Illinois. And you got to get out in America, particularly my brothers, my black brothers and sisters, Latino brothers and sisters. You got to get out in America and see how people operate that don't look like you. I was in Augusta College in Moline, Illinois, in Quad Cities, about 2 hours, maybe 3 hours outside of Chicago. And I finished my show, and I had a deal back in the day. I didn't trust people how they paid me. So if you gave me a check, I wasn't going to put it in my account. I was going to go to your bank, cash it, take the cash, put it in my bank. I was a cash dude. That's another story. This particular time, I'm driving around looking for the bank where the check was written on, and I saw this line of pretty much all white people. Like pretty much all white people, maybe a couple, maybe black people, Latinos peppered in. But it was all white people. And I looked at it, and I'm thinking, this is a huge line. I'm thinking maybe it's a show or something, and maybe something is a movie, maybe it's a community event. It was not that, brothers and sisters. As I rolled around and came back around again, it was a food pantry in the middle of America. And this is not during COVID-19. This is not during the Great Recession. This was during a regular time. This is before Barack Obama was elected and we had the housing crash. These were people who were struggling in the heartland, and they didn't look like me and you. The narrative was the same. They were struggling, they had financial issues, but they didn't look like me and you. And at that point in time, it reminded me that white supremacy did not protect all white people. It's not for all white people. White supremacy allows you levels, but if you're not that part of the population, not part of the conversation that's framed this thing, then you're out of it. The thing about the Constitution, if you really start thinking about it, it was wealthy landowners, slave owners, all of that. But what did they own? They owned the means to production. So even if you had slaves, it means that you can do things with slaves that you couldn't do with anybody else. They were a means of production. If I didn't have a slave, the difference between a slave owner and a non-slave owner is that that slave gave mobility to your money. That slave was currency. If you could plow a field, it doesn't mean anything because all you could do is plow a field. With a slave, you could plow a field, you could raise children, you could build a house, you could do all these things, and it gave them a certain flexibility above everybody else. And as you begin to really break it down, today, even constitutional law determines life or death. How many times have you heard about executions being stayed or allowed? Why? They were taken to the Supreme Court. Supreme Court said yes or no, kick it down to the other court. And I learned, and I was speaking this, so I'm going to give a shout out to Brother Hussein Abdullah as we talk about this. White supremacy in the framework of constitutional law determines something that's extremely dangerous. It frames your time. Let me give a big shout out. My main man, Jabril. Love you, guy. I know you, man. Anti-white supremacy. I know you. I know your heart. The Constitution allows people in power to frame the time for justice, equality, and any kind of liberation that you're talking about. You think I'm lying? Look at the court system. I realize that the people, here's the game, folks. Here's the game. The people who uphold the Constitution know that it's not constitutional. They know that it's not relevant. It's not representative. It's not diverse. It's any of those things. But they're not willing to change it. They're not willing to take pen to paper and tell you that this thing, in and of itself, at its time, maybe it was relevant for the slave owners back then. And you needed an electoral college. But for right now, it's not applicable. For right now, it doesn't reflect the needs of the people it's supposed to serve. Thus, it serves the need of the people who look to oppress other people. I spoke about it yesterday, and I'll speak about it today. The Constitution sets up a system of government that's counterproductive. A House, a Senate, an executive board, a judicial And they all work in concert to do nothing except getting each other's way. Think about it. I could possibly be dead if I was on death row. I could possibly be dead just by virtue of the fact that so many cases waiting to be heard, not tried, heard at the Supreme Court level. Thus, when you start thinking about it, the magic of people like King, the people like Rayard Buston, Bernard Rustin, people like, they realize that the Constitution does an extremely evil job of managing time. You can literally be held up. Like, you have people talking about, we're going to defund the police, we're going to defund the police. Maybe in 15 years, maybe in 20 years. But guess what's going to enter into it? Constitutional law. Everybody knows that this thing has been laying out here for a lot of years. And we play the lie game. We want to believe in the system because that's all we have. We want to believe that the system is fair because we believe it has the potential to be fair. But in some regards, we're not looking at the fact that it hasn't been fair at all. Any aspect of fighting for justice, fighting for equality, fighting for meaningful wages has been what? An argument to get to the level where somebody says, you know what? Guess what? It is unconstitutional. Get that out of here. And that's the battle we've been fighting. So the protests, brothers and sisters, maybe should not be just about George Floyd, who died a horrible death. Maybe it's about the constitutional law that allowed the police, the legal system that allowed this type of behavior, because what you saw when the man was killed was a policeman that said, I know the law. And you quietly hear about policemen being released and and someone get charged, but most of them don't get charged because they know something that you don't know. They know the law. They know that the Constitution will protect them because the Constitution wrote in there, in that space, that you're going to protect the people who make the money. You're going to protect the people who have the power. Thus, I have to endow you with this little bit of power to make sure you do what I need you to do. So a lot of times we start getting into these situations and scenarios where we move away from things, let it be emotion, let it be outrage, but we're not having I have not yet been to a live stream with African-American scholars, with Muslim scholars, with any scholars that start talking about the impetus and the danger and the poison of constitutional law as it is today. We have Islamic law, but do we have constitutional law? Think about this. The Constitution, for all it is, it doesn't frame democracy. Democracy is a term that's going to be in the hands of the people who are in power. Thus, you can have a Donald Trump because he's going to frame democracy because it's not tied into the Constitution. Is it a fact? Is this really, think about this, folks. Is it a fact that every time there's an issue with the presidency that's legal, who does he look to? The Supreme Court, which automatically tells you he's looking for a constitutional way to get out of a jam. He's firing people, all of that. And I blame even myself because you know what? We're not talking about it enough. You know, we shall overcome should be, we shall understand constitutional law. That should be the new battle cry. We shouldn't be laying down because guess what, folks? Even the people we think are racist and all those things, you know what they don't understand? They don't understand constitutional law either. So maybe the rally this time, and I've been a little hard about people joining the protests, and you know, we have a lot of white people joining the protests who they ain't been down with the cause. I'm gonna call that what it is. They ain't been down with the cause. In fact, you know, when they're good protesters because they bring suntan lotion, like we're gonna be out here a while, Molly. My point is, even they are beginning to wake up to the fact that white supremacy will not work for them, never has, and even more so, constitutional law affects them too. Think about the prison system. The prison system is founded and framed around constitutional law. You say, what constitutional law? Brother, it's the amendment that had a vagrancy rule after slavery. And it allowed for slavery after slavery. Therefore, you have to have a 13th Amendment, but there's always going to be a workaround. And believe me, if you get a victory at the constitutional level, don't think that somebody's setting up another challenge to it so that even though you have a victory, it can be held up in the next 6, 7, 8, 15, 20 years till they get around to it. But until that point, the law is still on the books. I can't tell you how many times I've been frustrated. Look at mandatory sentencing. A judge no longer has the right to interpret the case in front of him. Whatever it is, a federal case, you got to do 25 years, mandatory 25 years. It may be a first-time offender. It may be somebody who has extenuating circumstances. And by the way, the justice system here in the United States is not based on extenuating circumstances. It's based on convictions. That's what the Constitution leans for. It leans to it. But look at federal sentencing, folks. 25 years. No matter what you did, what's the situation, you're getting 25 years in prison. Think about that. There are guys who did minor crimes, things that would be considered light felonies, if that, hard misdemeanors, who are doing 25 years. And when you talk to the judges in the courtroom will say, hey, listen, I understand what your situation is, but according to the law, I have to give you 25 years. Even the state statutes conflict with it. Maybe that person only do 2 to 3 years. But according to the law that you didn't make, brothers and sisters, we didn't make the law. Now you're getting 25 years in prison. I've guaranteed you 25 years in prison. I'm reading about convicts now trying to get stays for death sentences. You waiting for, have you seen the Supreme Court? That's an old crew, brothers and sisters. The Supreme Court, I'm like, some of y'all were there when they made the 13th Amendment. I'm only saying the average age of Supreme Court people, and it's not like they're wise or whatever, it's just they've been familiar with constitutional law, but they're in the advanced age. I think the average age of the Supreme Court right now is 172 years old. That's my opinion. But let's break this down. Even in the scenario of what we're talking about, especially critical race theory, you still have laws on the books that allow people to act and function in a way that's immoral, but get away with it because it's still legal. So as you begin to think about this, let me remind you what I talked about yesterday. It was something from Minister Khalid Muhammad while he was still in the nation. But he said this, and I cannot forget it. Constitutional law is essentially the framework for white supremacy. That's how you have it. That's how you have it. You go around in any other country, they can't really have white supremacy because they don't have a constitution. Only countries that can do it are the ones that have a constitution like the United States. Think about this, though. He talked about the idea of the white supremacist. He said the white man, but he talked about the white supremacist. And he said the white supremacist is a baby. It's a child. He said, and it's a child that's never been told no. And when their child ran up against the reality that there was a no, the child simply tried to readjust the reality so it's still a yes. That mindset is the thing we're not addressing right now. While we're marching, we need to be reading. While we're reading, we need to be having discussions about the fact that constitutional law is allowing people to get away with murder, literally. We're the only culture in the world that has a criminal system with a LEWAP, which is, I won't kill you, but I'm going to give you life without parole in prison. And if anybody's ever been to prison, you know exactly what I'm talking about. You're talking about brothers who are going in and they're not coming out unless they got a toe tag, which means that it doesn't matter what you did. There's no revisiting. There's no redemption. There's no reframing of where you are in terms of rehabilitation. The law says you can't leave here till you're dead. So what does that say for the living? It says that, and I've said this before, particularly with Muslims, African Americans, we need to develop the strength and the wherewithal and the courage to, at some point in time, extract ourselves away from this system. It's not working. It's not healthy. I know I talked about racism as not being healthy, but the laws that allow it are even more deadly and toxic. Furthermore, the issue is, when are we as a group going to look at common sense and moral law, spiritual law, and put it above this constitutional law? We've never had that argument before. We've put it out in places. We've challenged the law, whether it be voting, whether it be education. But wouldn't it be interesting if we looked at the law in a situation, in a scenario, an orientation with the express intent to aspire and develop something above it? And you don't need to have competition. See, white supremacy can't handle competition. If you took all the minorities out of the United States, I'm talking about everybody that's brown, black, yellow, took them out of the United States, and you left just white people here in the United States, they kill themselves. That's what happened in Europe. They only came here with the Native Americans to express what they failed to do over there, and that's kill everybody over there. Here's my point. I would agree that Minister Khalid Muhammad said something that was profound. He said that the idea of white supremacy is that you have a child, but it's a very dangerous child. And you can always tell when you have that child, because it doesn't matter what you do, brothers and sisters, that child is always discovering. That's a nature and characteristic of a child. A child does what? Always discovering things when they're growing up, because they are discovering things. It's new, but that's the nature of a child. Mommy, look what I did. Daddy, look what I made. Grandma, look what I could do. And that's fine for a child, but the child evolves and understands engaging with creation and environment. You know what? All the things I could do, engage with, they're pre-existing. Now I engage with them in hopes of developing a new reality. White supremacy and white supremacy does not do that. It keeps that child a child, but more importantly, for everyone else who's evolved, it makes damn sure that you don't evolve too. You must stay a child. You must stay a child, because that's the only way that it exists. I said yesterday that I don't see ourselves as having a leader. I said we have a child. And that child and all the people around him who are essentially adults afraid of a child, that's the Senate, that's the United States Congress, that's the Supreme Court. You're all afraid of a child. So all rationality and framing of realistic life, I want to say realistic life expressing ideas and thoughts are out of the window, because you have a child. And the nature of this child, brothers and sisters, is to kill everything that's not a child along with it. Think about the complexity of Obamacare. Flashback, do you know how hard it was to get Obamacare? And in the height of the biggest pandemic, we have a guy trying to get the Congress, not the Congress, trying to get the Supreme Court to rule Obamacare what? Unconstitutional. And this is the game. This is the game. Now, for whatever reason, we haven't figured that out yet. Maybe we need to have a couple of these live streams talking about how do we rewrite the damn Constitution. Well, it's a piece of paper that never worked. It was an idea that was never for everybody. It was a justice that could never be achieved. And it wasn't about sharing power and empowering people. It was about holding on to power. And that was amongst people who were powerful. Think about that. These are the powerful in the next level of power. We want to keep it from them. We need to do a much better job of saying, listen, one of the things that the Constitution could never account for, brothers and sisters, is when it didn't have the resources, when it didn't have complicity, when it didn't have people who breathe and lay their lives down for the Constitution. Somebody say, you know what, I defended this country. Brother, all due respect, You defended the Constitution. And there's always going to be some conflicted feelings, brothers and sisters, because you know it doesn't work. It's not meant to work. Think about it. The United States says we have democracy. This is the best form of government in the world, but it doesn't work for everybody. It's slow, it's retroactive, it's retarded. It's all the things that they don't want you to know. It's a shame because we claim to be the best, but we have a system of government that doesn't work because we have constitutional law that was not for everybody, as I said before. And the worst part about it is it beats its chest going around the world going, this is the best form of government. You know, the governments that took on democracies in Africa and Asia, and places like that, they weren't democracies. They were dictatorships. They weren't democracies. They were autocrats. They weren't democracies. They were oligarchs. They weren't democracies. They were people who, in absence, if you will, of a constitution, saying that's the model that I'm going to do because it's going to allow me to keep power and oppress people I should be serving. Brothers and sisters, I'm going to get ready to go. But I want you to think about what I said. Think about that racist. That racist is a child holding on to the nipple of white oppression. And you say, why are most racists white? I said, because the nipple of oppression only allows for one group. It ain't black people, it ain't Latinos. It allows for that one person. That person will stay attached to that nipple as long as it gives them in their mind that milk. The adults in us know, you know what? I was breastfed for a minute, but now I'm grown. And that over there, that's a 32-year-old man, 42-year-old man, or in the case of the United States president, however old he is, he's still being breastfed. So before I get out of here, I want everybody to think closely about what I said. Don't wait for a lie. Don't wait for the impossible. The Constitution will never be rewritten unless we do it. Unless we take our resources, we take our intelligence, and we separate. And we find a working document that speaks to the human condition, not just the human condition, the human spirit, but also the human capacity to love and care. And once we do that, you won't need this Constitution because nobody's going to follow it. Because for the first time ever, you're going to have a competition between constitutional law and God's law. You make the choice. You guys take care. Preacher Ma Shout Out Show. Hope to see you tomorrow. God bless. Tomorrow's topic, I'm just giving a heads up. I'm going to be speaking about something I saw. This is a brother of mine. He's on Netflix, Hassan Minhaj. I have to speak to him about something I saw that I didn't agree with. So hopefully he and I will talk before then. But other than that, brothers and sisters, God bless, man. And Constitution or not Constitution, you know what's in your heart is right. And don't let them hamper you about laws and things like that because they are not there for your benefit anyway. All right? Like they say, in the words of George Clinton, think it ain't illegal yet.